Hello. In this video, I'm going to cover Chapter 16, Number 3. I'm also going to go ahead and cover in the same video, I think I can easily do this. I'm a bold person, I guess. I think I can cover in the same segment here, Chapter 16, Number 12. Let me read them, and I think I can justify doing this. Number 3 goes like this. You learned in an earlier chapter that if there is an inflationary gap in the short run, then in the long run a new equilibrium arises when input prices and expectations adjust upward, causing the short-run aggregate supply curve to shift upward and to the left and pushing equilibrium real GDP per year back to its long-run value. In this chapter, however, you learned that the Federal Reserve can eliminate an inflationary gap in the short run by undertaking a policy action that reduces aggregate demand. Letter A is to propose one monetary policy that should eliminate an inflationary gap in the short run. Letter B is in what way might society gain if the Fed implements the policy you have proposed instead of simply permitting long-run adjustments to take place. Number 12 reads like this. Assuming that the Fed judges inflation to be the most significant problem in the economy and that it wishes to employ all of its policy instruments except interest on reserves, what should the Fed do with its three policy tools? So I think I'm going to draw the aggregate supply aggregate demand framework, remind you again of what the inflationary gap looks like, and then I'm going to use that to, of course, answer number 3, but I think also I can use that to answer number 12, because if you notice in there, the Fed judges inflation to be the most significant problem. It's pretty much the same question. One's with the model, and then one has other tools the Fed could use. So let's see if we can do that here in just one, get it over with, right? Here we are. I'm going to draw the aggregate supply aggregate demand framework. This is a good reminder of what this looks like. So with this framework, what we're talking about is real output down here and the price level up here. Long-run aggregate supply is a vertical line because that represents the productive capacity of the economy. It's a parallel idea to the production possibilities curve. It's what the economy can do. Aggregate demand is downward sloping. And the determinants of aggregate demand, I'm just reminding you, are C, I, G, and NX. The same as the national income identity, consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. And then there's also short-run aggregate supply, which I haven't drawn on here because I have to think about where I want these to intersect so that I meet the criteria of the question. We have an inflationary gap. Well, a recessionary gap is when output is below its long-run potential. An inflationary gap is when output is above its long-run potential. So what the question is proposing then is that our short-run equilibrium is somewhere right of our long-run aggregate supply curve. Thus, we have an inflationary gap. Our output is out here. The economy is very hot. Aggregate demand is very high, really is what we're talking about. And we do have upward pressure on prices, but honestly, we're not too concerned with that, because the Fed can do something about this rather promptly. If the economy is too hot, this is what we have the Federal Reserve really to address. Well, it has many tasks, but this is what we rely on the Federal Reserve to do, because we can't really rely on fiscal policymakers to do it, at least not until the next election, and there's always another election around the corner. So the Federal Reserve can take away the punch bowl or be the party poopers and try to cool off the economy. Now, how will they do that? They have to reduce aggregate demand. And aggregate demand is the determinants, again, the shifters are consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Well, they're not going to affect directly net exports. They're not going to directly affect government spending. They can directly affect consumption and investment. Now, do they want to increase or decrease consumption and investment? They want to decrease those to decrease aggregate demand. So if they want to decrease consumption and investment, since what they're ultimately going to be able to affect is interest rates, do they want to increase or decrease interest rates? They want to increase interest rates to address this inflationary gap. Now, how do they affect interest rates? They use the money supply. So if they want to increase interest rates, well, interest rates are the price of money. They're the price tag on money. So if you want something to have a higher price tag, do you make it more scarce or less scarce? To make something's price tag be higher, all else held constant, you make it more scarce. So what the Federal Reserve wants to do to raise interest rates to decrease aggregate demand is to decrease the money supply. They're going to make money tighter, more scarce, less of it out there. They're going to decrease the money supply. And the way they're going to do that using open market operations is through the buying and selling of bonds. If they're looking to decrease the money supply, that means what they want to do is put bonds on the bond trading desks and take money out of the banking system. So they will sell bonds, because when they sell bonds, they're putting out bonds and taking away money, and they're going to lock it up where no one can get it. So the answer to the question is that they will sell bonds using open market operations, and that will decrease aggregate demand. I can just draw it in here. That will decrease aggregate demand. And get us back to our normal level of output and push back down on that price level rise. They have choked off the hot economy by selling bonds. And the question, let me make sure I've addressed it thoroughly for number 3. Propose one monetary policy action that could eliminate that. Well, that's what we've done. They would sell bonds using open market operations. And then letter B says, in what way might society gain if the Fed implements its policy you have postponed instead of simply permitting long-run adjustments to take place? Well, this happens, they can do this fairly quickly. In fact, it becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy because the Fed has so much influence over markets that if they announce that they're going to do this, markets might cool off. It might happen even before anything's been done because they're that influential. So they can move this aggregate demand curve rather quickly. They also, what they have done here, when we had upward pressure on prices, the long-run adjustment that the question was talking about was that we would have stayed at our original aggregate demand curve and short-run aggregate supply eventually would rise up to here, adjusting for higher prices and higher prices of inputs. Well, then we would have a net price increase, where here we just pulled prices right back down. But the real answer that the author is looking for is that this happens more quickly than allowing the market to adjust to the long-run aggregate supply curve. So then number 12, if we look at it, assuming the Fed judges inflation to be the most significant problem in the economy and that it wishes to employ all of its policy instruments except interest on reserves, what should the Fed do with its 3 policy tools? Well, open market operations is the primary tool with the Fed. That's what we just described. Would they buy bonds or would they sell bonds? Envision those two sides of the vault. You got the bond side and the money side. In order to choke off the economy, to calm things down, what they want to do is raise interest rates. So in order to raise interest rates, they're going to make money more scarce. They're going to take money away. How do you take money away? You take out the bonds. So what action are they doing? They're selling bonds. They could sell bonds with open market operations. That was the answer to number 3. That's also the first answer of the choices, the different things that the Fed could do for number 12. They could also increase the discount rate, and that is the rate that the Fed actually charges banks for short-term borrowing. So aside from affecting reserves, those are the primary tools that the Fed could use. Is they could increase the discount rate, or use what they do all the time, is use open market operations by selling bonds. So those are the answers to number 3 and to number 5. Oh, we didn't do number 5. Where did I get 5? There's no 5 in this. Those are the answers to number 3 and to number 12.